Tonight, while you sleep, something may be happening inside your arteries that you have no awareness of. Not pain, not a dramatic event, just a slow, sustained pressure. Elevated well above where it should be, driven by things you do in the 2 hours before bed. Things that seem completely harmless, things millions of adults over 60 do every single night. Most people think of blood pressure as a number their doctor records at an appointment. But the hours between dinner and sleep are among the most biologically critical for your heart, your kidneys, and your brain. And the specific habits that take place in those hours can either protect that biology or silently undermine it. Before you get into bed tonight, you need to know what I'm about to tell you, because the science behind this is not subtle. And once you understand it, it changes what your evenings look like permanently. My name is Dr. Sarah Envem. I am a cardiologist, and for 16 years, most of my clinical work has been with adults over 60 managing hypertension. It is the condition I see most often and the one I believe is most frequently misunderstood. About 15 years ago, something in my practice shifted my thinking. I was seeing patients whose daytime blood pressure was well controlled on medication, but whose overnight and early morning readings were consistently and significantly elevated. When I started asking those patients about their evening routines in detail, the same cluster of behaviors kept appearing, the same 3 or 4 habits in patients who had nothing else in common. That pattern is what this video is about. There are no products here, no supplements, no agenda. Everything I share is grounded in published research, and where the evidence has limits, I will say so plainly. This is the conversation there is rarely enough appointment time to have properly. Here is something most people never hear about blood pressure. It is not a fixed number. In a healthy cardiovascular system, it follows a natural daily rhythm, peaking mid-morning, falling through the afternoon, and then dropping significantly during sleep. Researchers call this the nocturnal dip. It is not incidental. That overnight pressure drop is when your arteries recover, your heart works at its lowest load, your kidneys do critical regulatory work, and vascular inflammation is brought back into balance. In a healthy adult, blood pressure during sleep drops roughly 10 to 20% compared with daytime. Research published in journals, including Hypertension and the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, has consistently shown that people whose pressure does not dip sufficiently, a pattern called non-dipping, face significantly elevated risk for cardiovascular events, kidney damage, and stroke, independent of their daytime readings. In other words, your blood pressure at 2 in the morning may matter more than the number your doctor records at an appointment. Several common evening behaviors directly suppress that nocturnal dip. They hold the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight branch, in a state of activation when it should be winding down. And in adults over 60, those interference effects are compounded by specific biological changes. 3 changes after 60 amplify the problem. First, arterial stiffness. Blood vessels lose elasticity with age, and that stiffness amplifies the blood pressure response to sympathetic activation. Research published in the American Journal of Hypertension documents that arterial stiffness accelerates after 60, which means the same evening stressor, the same salty snack, the same emotionally activating program, produces a larger, longer blood pressure spike than it did 20 years ago. Second, the baroreflex, the body's internal pressure sensor, becomes less sensitive. In a younger system, small pressure spikes are detected and corrected quickly. After 60, that feedback loop slows and elevated pressure lingers longer before the regulatory system catches up. Third, melatonin output declines with age. Beyond its role in sleep, melatonin appears to support endothelial function and may contribute to the nocturnal dip. As production falls, that supportive effect weakens. This is an area of active research, but the directional findings are consistent enough to be worth noting. Let me ask you something specific. When you wake up in the morning, do you ever feel your heart already working? A mild heaviness in the chest that fades after you've been up for a few minutes? Do you wake during the night with a headache at the back of your skull? Or do you notice that your first morning blood pressure reading is consistently the highest of the day? If any of those are familiar, type yes in the comments right now. Those are potential signs of non-dipping, and they are exactly what I want to explain today. What makes this pattern so insidious is that it is completely invisible at a standard appointment. Your doctor takes your blood pressure at 11 in the morning. Neither of you sees what that pressure does at midnight or at 2 a.m., the hours when arterial wear, kidney stress, and stroke risk accumulate silently year after year. That is what I'm about to address. I want to tell you about Gerald. He was 68, a retired firefighter from Columbus, Ohio. He had been on blood pressure medication for 6 years, and his office readings were acceptably controlled. But Gerald kept waking at 3 or 4 in the morning with a dull, pressing headache. And on his home monitor, his 6 a.m. readings were consistently 15 to 20 points above his midday numbers. He had raised this with 2 different physicians. He was told morning readings are always a bit higher, his medication was working fine, and he should not worry about fluctuations. Nobody asked what his evenings looked like, nobody asked what he was eating after dinner, what he was watching, or how long he was on his phone before turning out the light. When I saw Gerald, I asked him to walk me through a typical evening in detail. Within 10 minutes, I had identified 3 specific patterns, all of which I will name shortly, that were almost certainly suppressing his nocturnal dip and driving those early morning spikes. We made targeted changes to his evening routine, no new medications. 6 weeks later, Gerald came back with his home monitoring log. His 6 a.m. readings had dropped an average of 14 points. The morning headaches had stopped. He said, "I feel like I actually rested for the first time in years. I didn't realize sleep was supposed to feel like that. This was not a miracle. This was his body responding to better conditions. Conditions he had simply never been given the information to create. The first pattern is eating salty foods in the 2 to 3 hours before bed." The relationship between sodium and blood pressure is well established, but the timing component is rarely discussed. Sodium consumed late in the evening must be processed by the kidneys during the night, the same window the kidneys use for pressure regulation. Research published in the American Journal of Hypertension consistently shows that evening sodium intake is more disruptive to the nocturnal dip than equivalent sodium consumed earlier in the day. The foods involved are not always obvious: crackers, processed cheese, pretzels, tinned soup, warmed as a late snack. Many people have no idea how much sodium a typical evening serving contains. The second pattern is consuming emotionally stimulating content, news, conflict-heavy dramas, heated commentary, true crime, in the hour before sleep. This is not primarily about blue light. It is about sympathetic nervous system activation, when the brain processes content that generates anxiety, outrage, or suspense. The body responds with elevated cortisol, elevated heart rate, and elevated blood pressure. In a younger, more elastic vascular system, this resolves quickly. In an older system with stiffer arteries and a slower baroreflex, that activation lingers well into the sleep hours. Research examining pre-sleep psychological arousal and nocturnal cardiovascular regulation, including work published in Psychosomatic Medicine, supports this association consistently. The third pattern surprises people. When the body is horizontal and supine, fluid that has pooled in the lower extremities during the day redistributes centrally into the chest circulation. Research published in the Journal of Hypertension has examined how this fluid shift increases cardiac preload and contributes to elevated blood pressure in the early sleep hours, particularly in older adults with any degree of venous insufficiency. Modest head-of-bed elevation has been studied in the context of both nocturnal hypertension and sleep disordered. Breathing, an independent driver of overnight pressure elevation. I know what some of you are thinking. I have watched the news before bed my whole life. I have had a snack at night for 40 years. If this was really a problem, wouldn't I already know? The honest answer is the damage does not announce itself. It builds across years as cumulative arterial wear and a slow upward drift in baseline blood pressure. The kind your doctor treats with progressively adjusted medication while neither of you fully investigates where the upstream pressure is coming from. That is why addressing these habits now matters. And I am about to show you exactly what to replace them with. The solution is a structured evening routine, 3 targeted changes in the 2 hours before bed that work with your body's own overnight regulatory systems instead of against them. No medication changes, no equipment beyond one inexpensive item, no cost beyond your attention. Let me explain why. Each change works physiologically. When you cut late-night sodium, you clear the overnight kidney load that competes with the body's natural pressure regulation cycle. Research on evening sodium timing, including observational work in the American Journal of Hypertension, supports this as a meaningful lever in salt-sensitive individuals, a category that becomes more prevalent with age. When you replace high arousal content with something low stimulation in the final hour, you allow cortisol and sympathetic tone to decline on their natural schedule. The nervous system does not distinguish between fictional conflict on screen and real threat. It responds to the emotional signal your brain generates. Replacing that signal gives the vascular relaxation that drives the nocturnal dip a proper runway. Cortisol clearance is slower in older adults, which means the pre-sleep window matters more, not less, after 60. When you elevate the head of your bed by 3 to 5 inches, you reduce the central fluid shift that increases cardiac preload in the early sleep hours. Studies examining head of bed elevation in populations with nocturnal hypertension have found directional benefit, and the risk of the intervention is essentially zero. These 3 changes address the 3 physiological pathways most commonly responsible for suppressing the nocturnal dip. But this is only the first layer. What I am about to show you next multiplies every benefit I just described, and it costs nothing extra. Carol was 71, a retired high school English teacher from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She had managed hypertension for 9 years, was on 3 medications, and her cardiologist was satisfied with her office readings. On paper, Carol was doing fine, but Carol was frightened in a way she had told no one. Not her cardiologist, not her adult children, barely herself. Her husband had died of a stroke 4 years earlier. She had been in the room, and since then she had been lying awake in the small hours, alone, taking her blood pressure on her home monitor with a quiet, controlled panic that she managed by herself every single night. The numbers at 2 and 3 in the morning were significantly higher than what her doctor was seeing. She had not mentioned them. She was afraid of what mentioning them might mean. When she came to me and showed me her home log, every entry above 140 written in red pen, the pattern was immediately clear. Classic non-dipping. And her evening routine was a near-perfect case study in the 3 habits I just described. We restructured her evenings. 8 weeks later, her nocturnal readings had come down meaningfully. Her cardiologist reviewed the updated log and reduced one of her medications. But what Carol said at that appointment was the thing I have thought about since. For the first time in 4 years, I stopped waiting for something to happen. I just went to sleep. That is what giving someone back a sense of agency looks like from the inside. Stop consuming sodium-containing foods within 2 hours of your intended bedtime. This does not mean no food after dinner. It means anything you eat in that window should be genuinely low sodium. Fresh fruit, plain unsalted nuts, plain yogurt. The reason is direct. That 2-hour window is when the kidneys begin their overnight pressure regulation cycle. A late sodium load competes with that cycle. If you skip this step, the subsequent elements in the protocol are undermined at their foundation. In the 60 minutes before you intend to sleep, remove all high arousal content. Turn off the news, pause conflict-heavy streaming, put the phone face down, replace it with anything that does not generate emotional activation. Reading, gentle music, a short walk outside, quiet conversation. This is not a lifestyle preference. It is a direct cardiovascular intervention. You are giving your sympathetic nervous system the 60-minute runway it needs to bring cortisol to levels that allow genuine vascular relaxation at sleep onset. If you skip this step, the nocturnal dip either arrives late, is shallower, or does not occur. Raise the head of your bed by 3 to 5 inches using bed risers placed under the legs at the head end. These cost $10 to $25 at most hardware or home goods stores. Do not stack pillows under your head. That bends the neck without achieving the gravitational benefit of tilting the whole body. The goal is a 3 to 5 degree incline across the full body. A brief note on a common error: a composite patient, call him Thomas, 73, a retired electrician from Knoxville, reported worsening back pain 2 weeks into the protocol. He had stacked 3 pillows under his neck. We clarified, risers under the bed frame, not pillows under the head. He called back the following week. "I feel ridiculous that I didn't just ask," he said. His morning readings improved within 10 days of getting the method right. The principle is straightforward, but so is the error. Tilt the mattress, not the neck. This is the multiplier. The nocturnal blood pressure dip is not just a passive response to being horizontal. It is a timed biological event driven by the circadian clock. Going to bed and waking at the same time every day, including weekends, synchronizes that clock in a way that directly supports consistent dipping. Research in the journal Sleep and in Cardiovascular Literature consistently links circadian variability, late nights at weekends, irregular wake times, to disrupted nocturnal pressure patterns independent of other factors. Total investment. The bed risers are the only potential purchase. Budget $10 to $25. everything else costs nothing except consistency. Many people check their reading right before bed to make sure numbers are acceptable. If the reading is elevated, which it may be because the nocturnal dip has not yet begun, the anxiety that produces activates the very sympathetic response you are trying to calm. It becomes self-defeating. Take your evening reading at least 90 minutes before sleep, then put the monitor away. Many people make the sodium change in principle, but keep a side habit: a few crackers, salted nuts, a flavored rice cake, right at the edge of the cutoff window. The error is unconscious. Check the labels of whatever accompanies your evening cup of tea or decaf. A single serving of many popular evening snacks contains 300 to 500 milligrams of sodium. That is enough to meaningfully load the overnight renal system. The most common error among motivated people is implementing all 4 protocol elements simultaneously after decades of established habit. Change stacked too fast rarely sticks. Introduce one element every 2 to 3 evenings. Start with the sodium cutoff. It is the most direct lever. Add the pre-sleep content change, then the bed elevation, then the consistent schedule. Within 2 weeks, the full protocol is in place. It feels natural rather than imposed, and the likelihood of it becoming permanent is substantially higher. 3 things. First, identify what you ate and drank in the last 2 hours before bed last night and check one label for sodium content. Second, in the final 60 minutes before you sleep tonight, replace whatever you normally watch with something low arousal. Notice the difference in how you feel when you actually lie down. Third, take a blood pressure reading right now or first thing tomorrow morning. Write it down. That is your baseline. Order or pick up bed risers for the head end of your bed. Budget $10 to $25. Most hardware or home goods stores carry them. That is the only purchase this protocol requires. The complete protocol in one sentence: no sodium within 2 hours of sleep, no high arousal content in the final 60 minutes, head of bed elevated, 3 to 5 inches, consistent sleep and wake times 7 days a week. The 30-day challenge: each morning record your waking blood pressure, your sleep quality from 1 to 10, and whether you woke with a headache or chest heaviness. Come back to the comments in 30 days. Leave your starting numbers today if you want accountability. Before you go, I want to leave you with something I think matters more than any protocol. You are not broken. Some of what you've accepted as the inevitable cost of getting older, the morning heaviness, the elevated readings, the sense that your body is simply less reliable than it was, is habitual. It is behavioral, and habitual problems have solutions. The biology of the nocturnal dip is not something reserved for younger people. It is running in you right now every time you sleep. The question is only whether the conditions you create in the hours before bed allow it to do its job properly. I want to be honest about what this protocol can and cannot do. It will not cure hypertension. It will not replace your prescribed medications, and you should not adjust any dose without consulting your physician. What the evidence consistently supports is that addressing these evening behaviors can meaningfully improve nocturnal blood pressure patterns, may reduce the medication burden needed for adequate control over time, and almost certainly reduces the silent cardiovascular and renal wear that accumulates when overnight pressure stays elevated year after year. Over a decade, that compounds in your favor. If this video has changed the way you think about your evenings, I want to ask one thing of you. Not to share it everywhere, just to think of one person in your life who mentions their blood pressure, who seems tired despite sleeping, whose doctor keeps adjusting medication without fully finding the right dose. Send them this video. One click. If this is the kind of evidence-based, honest conversation you want more of, subscribe. Every week, I bring you exactly this: the research that does not fit into a 15-minute appointment, explained in a way you can actually use. No products, no agenda. And leave me one comment before you go. Which of these 3 patterns did you recognize in yourself? I read every reply, and your answers shape what I cover next. 1. Close-up of a home blood pressure monitor with cuff on upper arm, soft morning light, warm and non-alarming. 2. Television in a dim room showing a news broadcast, quick cut to the same room with TV off, and a book open, single lamp, visual contrast, no narration needed. 3. Kitchen counter at night, close-up of a snack bowl with a visible nutrition label showing a high sodium figure. 4. Stylized slow motion of a person lying down, transitioning to sleep, optional graphic overlay showing healthy dipping, versus non-dipping blood pressure curve through the night. 5. Simple overhead shot. Bed risers beside a bed frame, then installed with a slight head and incline visible. Practical and reassuring. 6. Morning routine. Older adult sitting on the edge of the bed taking a reading, writing in a small notebook. Natural light, independent, competent, calm. 1. Section 3. Nocturnal dip, text overlay. Nocturnal dip. The 10 to 20% blood pressure drop your body should make every night. Hold 4 seconds, dissolve. 2. Section 3. Non-dipping risk, 2-line graphic. Non-dippers, elevated risk of stroke, kidney damage, and cardiac events. Clean white on deep blue. 3. Section 5. 3 patterns, full-screen sequential text. Each pattern name appears one at a time as Dr. Sarah names it. Minimal animation. 4. Section 10. Action plan. 3-panel graphic. Tonight/this week/ongoing. 1-line summary under each. Hold during narration. Dr. Sarah Envem. Calm, slightly concerned expression. Background, dimly lit bedroom or bedside table with a blood pressure monitor. Visible. Text overlay. Stop doing this before bed in bold white with a yellow underline bar. Subtext. It's raising your blood pressure while you sleep. Color palette, deep navy and warm white. Single amber accent. Avoid heavy red. The 60-plus audience responds better to authority than alarm.